I think we live. I'll wait for a couple of comments to come through. Kia ora, people. Hello, good evening. Just waiting for people to build up. Joined today by Arunima and Zinnia from Ames Global. I believe that we streaming on two pages today. Sorry, that's what happens when you have kids at home. They just walk in to Facebook Lives. Um, we are going to be, this is our last Facebook Live for the year before we close off in December. So we thought today we'll cover off on public demand. So thank you for those of you that have requested that we do another Facebook Live before the end of the year. It has been a very hectic few months, I would say. Um, so what we thought we would do today is that we would try and cover off on the RV 2021, which has been the biggest policy of the year, if not for a lot of our lifetimes. I mean, I've seen some big policies, but this is definitely the biggest as it gets. And we will also talk about the interim visa. We'll pick up some of those intricate details around interim visas that people are not aware of because it's a niggly little thing. But and then we'll also talk about accredited employer work visa if you want to. But most of all, we do want to spend the next 35 minutes taking questions. I do want to start off just by setting the scene and telling people that I think it is a fantastic move that you guys are going to be getting interim visas. For a lot of people, just getting the interim visa is fantastic because you don't have to worry about your temporary visa extension. But it can backfire a few other people and their circumstances. So today we're not going to touch on who would benefit from it because majority would. But today we're going to touch on some of those nuances that you haven't thought of with the interim visa that you need to be careful of before you make the decision to apply for it. Zinnia, introducing you for the technical stuff. I see there's people building. There's viewers that are just adding. Can you just, while we wait for questions to come in, and there's some good questions that have just started popping in, I'll man the questions. Zinnia, can you just tell people very quickly what's the latest with RV 2021? Just really briefly, because we're literally a day away from when it starts, and what's happening with the interim visa.
The latest is that immigration has, from their end, finished their round of emails for phase 1. That's done. A lot of people have not got it, but that's okay. Doesn't matter. The other one is, of course, the biggest announcement that came, I think it was Thursday or Friday, if my memory fades, about the interim visa. If anybody wonders why I'm looking, I've got just a bunch of screens going, so I'm just checking other screens. So interim visa is something that people get if their current visa expires while they're waiting the outcome of the residence visa. And it's granted automatically. And if people, the interesting thing is we ran a story on our Facebook. So there was a poll over the weekend and there was 240 responses. And the question that was asked was how many of you are actually going to take up the interim visa option? And 66% people said no, surprisingly.
Yeah,
we know why they know. We know that, but I think that's what we are going to go into a little bit later.
Yeah. So today, just for those that are joining in now, we are going to be covering some of those scenarios and talking about some of the situations where an interim visa may not be the most appropriate option. I do reiterate for majority of you, it is a lot of relief, and that's not what we're going to talk about today. So I think the first thing I do want to start off with is, like I said, this is our last Facebook Live of the year. So please feel free to ask questions and take this opportunity to ask us whatever you want. If we can't get through all the questions, because I can see lots of similar kind of topics coming in the questions, then you know where to reach us. And we do usually reply to as many questions that come to us. The first thing I do want to say is that an interim visa is not a temporary visa. I think that's the first thing. It is a real special category that I almost call it like a bridge when you go from one visa to another visa type. It's a visa that you go on, but then you can't go on to another visa. Zinnia, do you want to just simplify that for people? I think you were saying that it basically freezes your status, isn't it?
Yes. So it just freezes your visa conditions for the next 12 months while your residence is being processed. So normally they would, as per policy, interim visas are not granted when you're going, like when residence is in process, but obviously an exception has been made for RV 2021. So yeah, it is a freezing of your conditions, but I think the critical part is that there is no, and this is not just for this interim visa, it's generally for all interim visas, you cannot apply for another visa. The concept behind it behind that is that if you need to apply for a temporary visa, you must hold a temporary visa in order to apply for a temporary visa. And because interim visa is not a temporary visa, that restricts your ability to apply for another visa.
I do want to give I do want an example just before you move on. So someone that's on an open work visa, so post-study open work visa, they would go on interim visa with exactly the same conditions. So that means they go on to an open work visa. For them, it's fantastic because they can just change employers, change jobs, just do what they want. However, they can't say, for example, while the residence visa is under processing, they can't consider studying or they can't go on to another type. So for them, it's all right. For those that are on essential skills work visas or talent work visas or LTSSL work visas, if you are looking at either changing your job in the next 12 months or so, or maybe changing roles within your employer, same company, different company, or maybe changing on to another visa altogether after you've applied for your RV 2021, then the interim visa may not be the right situation for you, may not be the right option for you because an interim visa doesn't allow you to make that change. Zinnia, do you want me to start taking questions, or do you want to talk more about the? Just tell
I
us
think
a couple of more things on interim visa, what you cannot do.
yeah.
Let's cover that quickly.
So I'm going to read it from immigration's website. I think it's just the best way because I think in our Facebook post that we did about interim visa, there were a lot of questions about can I do this, can I not do that. Okay, so on the immigration website, there's an alert that says if you do not apply for another temporary visa before your current visa expires, you will automatically get a 2021 interim visa and you will not be able to apply for a further visa. That's alert number one. Second one, if your resident visa is declined or if you withdraw. If you withdraw your 2021 resident visa application or your visa is declined, you will only be able to apply for further visas if you've applied for or hold a temporary visa, not on an interim visa. So I think immigration really does lay it out black and white. And yet, there's so many people, there's a lot of confusion out there as to like what they can and cannot do. The other thing is a lot of people think that interim visas will be granted. That's another fallacy because most cases, 99% of the cases, they will be granted, but there will be the odd case where they won't get it. We know it in our own practice where people have not had interim visas. The policy does say that grant of an interim visa is a matter of discretion to the immigration officer. So normally when you have character issues or immigration's like something's not feeling quite right with immigration's not feeling something right about your application, they can withhold temporary visas. So it's just one of those things that if people have character issues or if they've got medical issues or if something's, like in their employment or something's funny, I would suggest to not rely on that option of interim visa.
Yeah, or maybe start early with your options.
Yes.
So I think it is important that we now get into the questions. We did want to just start off with the interim visa just because it's great, but we're talking about the niggly things that you didn't think about, which can have a big effect on people. There's a question here which says, if we qualify for both skilled and scarce, which one would you recommend and why? Well, one thing that we've had confirmation from immigration is that if you apply, say, for example, with scarce, you then can switch the category to skilled, but you can't move from scarce and skilled to settled, if that makes sense. I would say that you apply for the one that you think you're the strongest on. At this stage, there's a lot of questions that are being asked of immigration around how they actually are going to assess a scarce category. How do they decide whether someone is a chef when they don't even have a qualification? How do they decide someone is a roofer when they've only just started working? How do they decide someone's a cabinet maker? So there's a lot of question marks around what is the yardstick that immigration is going to be using to assess scarce. We have been told that it's just a job description. Then the questions are what happens if the job description and the title is different? The employer calls you something else, but so, I mean, from where we see at this stage, there's a lot of unanswered questions around scarce. Only time will tell how this plays out. So if you do meet skilled quite clearly, apply for that. That's what my recommendation is going to be. Zania, I'll give you the next one. Can the birth certificate be a scanned copy?
Yes, it can be. This is an online application, so everything is a scanned copy. And so birth certificate can also be a scanned copy.
Can I apply for the skilled visa from India? I don't understand that question. If the question is around the resident visa, you have to be on shore and you have to meet the requirements. Melinda says, will they still work on existing applications like the prior TQ? That's a really, really good question. Something that I can't give you the answer quite definitively, but what I can tell you is that it was really interesting to see that immigration actually, the allocation that immigration was doing within the priority queue, I think from memory was the 23rd of September. I just said it in a webinar last week. They've actually they've really slowed down allocating or prioritized applications within that cohort since September. So it does feel like they're going to try and move them into the new queues, which I personally believe is quite unfair because a lot of people were, they would have got their residence a lot quicker through priority allocation. They were earning 130,000 or were a registered nurse. So yeah, I don't know. Zinnia, do you have any comments to make on that?
Yes. I'm actually working on a client for this case who's like a 250K earner. So we were in, because that person's RFW is not being allocated at the moment, even though they are priority. And immigration's putting it on lockdown. Like they're just not, because they're paper applications. So as a result of it being a paper application, nothing is being allocated, even though it's lodged. So application number's been generated, it's been lodged, but it's not moving. It's not being allocated. So it kind of defeats the purpose of being priority when you're not gonna like if this not gonna move. On that basis, it looks like the same person puts an RV 2021, they'll have it in hand by March, whereas this one might slug along. But then we'll see what if traffic light system makes it any better. Can't say.
Yeah, I think I do want to add to that. We have asked the question quite explicitly to immigration what their priority processing order is going to be in the RV space, because the last thing you want is that someone that's a high earner was going to be prioritized or an occupational registration in the skilled queues is now going to be lost amongst the crowd with the RV applications. Apart from what's published on the website, immigration is staying very tight-lipped on how they're going to actually prioritize within what they've said. If they're going to have REMs that are going to be taken higher, or if they're going to prioritize with occupational registration in that space, we don't know, and that is the number one concern at this stage. I also do want to say, for a lot of people, actually applying for a few people, and there's a few cohorts applying for RV 2021, it may not give them what they want. And my mind immediately goes to those people that have got, say, for example, their talent applications were over 90K, applied pride, they were fell into that get a PRV right at the end of it, that kind of cohort, because they were going to get a PRV through the residence from work, but now through RV 2021, they don't have that option. Immigration has said quite clearly that you only come out with a resident visa, not with a PRV. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. Okay, there's a question here. I would love to know, do I qualify for the interim visa? We'll be applying on my husband's work visa for our residence 2021 for our family. Sonia, I'll give that to you.
The whole family will get the interim visa. So if the whole family is included in the RV 2021, the whole family gets it.
Yeah. What would happen if my 2021 residence visa to my residence visa, if my SMCs were the case officer and waiting for decision? The case officer said they can make a decision in a couple of weeks. That's a really interesting one. We've actually had some, I can tell you what I hear from other stakeholders that contact me, and also Zinnia can then talk about what I hear in our own practice. Because what we're hearing is that immigration is really slowing down on making decisions. Yes, there's some approvals. If you're at the tail end of that process, there may be an approval coming through, but we're so close to the new cohort opening, the phase one opening, that immigration seems to be moving everything in there. Zinnia, what are your comments? What are we seeing in our practice?
So immigration, this has been confirmed by the contact center, that immigration officers and immigration generally, they're putting a note in the system saying person eligible for 2021 RV. Even in the PPI letter we got, I think about 2 weeks ago or something, like a week ago, we got a PPI letter in our practice. And the PPI letter was like, ANSCO not match, blah, blah, blah. And at the bottom, you're like, but you can apply for 2021 RV. So like, it's just PPI just for the sake of it. Like immigration saying, just apply under that one. So it's just one of those things. Even immigration officers are like, just go with 2021 RV.
Yeah. And I think it's also because immigration is really gearing up to put all their resources in that RV space. And then to have officers also doing this when immigration already is super short on officers is something that they are struggling with. Zinnia, I'll give this one to you. Do you know about those who came on critical purpose visas through border exemption in the last 6 months? The question is, will they be eligible for RV 2021?
So there are time frames. Sorry, I've got something stuck in my throat. There are time frames in which the person has to be in New Zealand. They have to arrive in New Zealand prior to July 2022, and then they have to be able to apply. They still have to serve the purpose of the critical purpose visitor visa that they came here on. So under some circumstances, they are eligible, but it's a bit of a case by case assessment. It's not a blanket rule.
Yeah, and they shouldn't be under the.
I'm just
And
going
they
to
shouldn't be. Yeah, and they shouldn't be on the short term critical purpose other critical visa, which only allows you to come here for 6 months and then leave. So if you're not in one of those areas and you have come in on a long term or you're a critical health worker, then you most likely should be. I would suggest that you have a chat with us so we can then do an individual assessment. There's a lot of questions. Sorry, I'm just getting through. This is a really good question. Zinnia, I might give this to you because I don't have a direct answer for this, but we hear this from a lot of clients. How do we really make our profile strong or try and get through the applications quicker in the skilled category?
So in the skilled category, the 27 category, I think really immigrate, and I'm just going to say what immigration said, is stick to what they've asked for. Don't give them extra information that they don't need. More than that, I think the place where people are going to have problems are going to be inconsistencies in their IRD, in their payslips, because immigration is going to ask for all of that. And so that's where issues would come up when there's, like say if somebody holds an essential skilled work visa and IRD doesn't match what immigration sees as being granted. For example, IRD is not looking like it was for 30 hours a week, or it's looking like the payment wasn't made properly. In all of these issue cases, the profile will not be.
Or if you were on essential skills for, say, I don't know, $24 an hour, and suddenly on the 29th of September onwards, you're on $27 an hour or higher. Those are scenarios where immigration has said that questions will be asked. So how you can make your case stronger is to make sure that you've got a robust story for when those questions are asked, or better, when you are making a submission, make sure that you can offload some of those real obvious anomalies in your application.
Yeah.
There's
a question here. If I am on a MEPV, which is a Migrant Exploitation Protection Visa, will I qualify for 12-month interim visa if my 2021 RV is in progress? Yes, you will. Migrant Exploitation Protection Visa is just another form of temporary visa.
Yeah. Jatinder's got a really good, he's got an interesting question. How do you calculate days? You just calculate days between 29th of September 2018 and 29th of September 2021 based on simple calculation. You just look at the calendar and see how many days you've been here. I know it's a little bit of pain, but that's pretty much how you do it. It needs to add up to 821 days, and you should have arrived in New Zealand prior to 29th of September 2018, even if you arrived on a different visa quite a while ago. Immigration is expecting that between 70 to 75% of the applications that they do receive will be under the settled criteria, which is the 821 days. I'm currently on a post-study work visa. Will my husband be granted a work visa as well? Zinnia, do you just want to reiterate? Because people are still thinking that the interim visa is a work visa. It's not. It is almost like a mirror reflection of it. Do you want to take that again?
Question for me?
Yeah, put it on the screen.
I'm currently on a post-study work visa. Will my husband be granted a work visa? Your husband will be granted an interim visa, which will extend the conditions of this post-study work visa. But there are, limitations with interim visa. You can't apply for another visa, which is fine in your case. You'll get open conditions for 12 months.
Because the question's actually incomplete. We assume that the question is saying whether you can apply for an interim visa when you apply for RV. I don't actually, that's something that we've assumed because that's what we're discussing today. But if your question is something else, please do clarify. Am I eligible? Okay. This one says, am I eligible? I'm eligible in the March phase. Do I need to get a limited medical now or somewhere near March? That's a really good question. There's
definitely a lot of questions somewhere near March. If you do it now, it's only valid for 3 months. So what are we today? 29th of November. So, I mean, it wouldn't last till, what would last? I'll have to get, probably it'll just come to the crux of getting expired. So it's just sensible to do it within the 3-month window whenever you're planning to submit.
Do you think they will ask for partners police clearance for RV 2021 visa? We've stayed in 2 countries for more than 12 months. Zinnia, maybe you can talk about police
They're
clearance?
not asking for overseas police certificates for anybody unless required. So when you submit the application, they're not asking for overseas police certificates for anybody unless they find something on your file that they require it. And New Zealand police certificate immigration will get themselves. That applies to both primary, principal applicant and secondary applicant.
Hi, I'm eligible for phase 2 and my visa expires in Feb. So can I get the interim visa?
No, because in order to get the interim visa, you have to submit an RV 2021. This is Feb, right? It said it expires in Feb.
Yeah. And the next one says, Zinnia, you look cool in curly hair. You changed your hair completely. Well, I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but thank you.
That's all right. I'll be back to curly next year.
But I did notice that she had straighter hair. Thank you. It's always good to throw in a little bit of humor in there. Okay, this one's this is about offshore. So Zinnia, I'll give this one to you. The person's asked it a few times. I would like to know what will be the scenario for partners stuck offshore who have already applied for post-study work visa, I believe, and will also be
PVV is visitor visa.
Okay, yeah. Your visitor visa, yeah. Partner visitor visa, sorry. And will also be included in the residence visa. Will the partners get the residence along with the main applicant? So I think it's really important this question leads into a few areas. Let's talk about partners that are offshore and their partner in New Zealand is the main applicant applying for the RV 2021 and what the situation in that, what that's going to be like.
Quite a hot topic, that one. So what you want to do in this case, you have to declare, obviously you have to declare your partner, you have to declare them in every application. If you can include your partner, but what would happen is they won't get the residence because if they haven't done 12 months of living together, because bear in mind, 12 months of living together is a requirement for all partnership residencies. It was an SMC, RFW, general partnership. It's just you have to do 12 months. And that criteria has not changed for this particular RV either. So if you include your partner, but you haven't done 12 months of living together, the main person technically will get the residence, and the other person, the partner, it is supposed to be deferred. That's how it was in previous residencies. And immigration, in the amendment circular they released, immigration did say that those conditions are not changing. So they did say that those conditions are remaining, but we have to take in mind that we haven't got the full policy. Like, the policy is not published. We've got an amendment circular, but it's not able to link to everything just yet. So the narrative that we're sticking with is that the partner would be deferred. But I don't know, Arunima, if you've got anything else to add to that.
Yeah, so I think what I'm telling clients is either the partner would be deferred. I mean, that's one option. Or some people that are pretty thin on their partnership, they just got married, don't really have much. Basically just lived a few days together and then been apart for quite a while. Quite a few people are making the decision to declare the partner, but actually just apply for residence on their own. And then once they get a residence, then the partner can get it because the partner doesn't meet the living together requirements. So it just depends on what your situation is. And it's very hard to make a generic statement, but both options are possible. Is there a priority order for applications for phase 2? That's a really good question. I did talk about it a while ago, that within the phase 2, what we're asking immigration is when you have over 100,000 applications that need to go through the system and everybody wants to apply as soon as the form opens, which is not possible. I think some people are already putting the money on the table that the system might crash. But how would they actually prioritize those applications? And I think we just alluded to the fact that some people would have gone through the queue a lot faster because they were under the skilled, applications, they were prioritized, and now they're not. They're going to be lost amongst the crowd. So what does this mean for them? Which means, and some people would have been waiting for a long time, would have just touched an officer, and then are they going to end up waiting a while again? So there's a lot of questions. I don't have the answers for you on that one. Oh God, there's quite a lot of questions. If visa expires on 6th of March, Zinnia, I do want you to talk about this one specifically. It's a really good question. A lot of people are in this space. If a visa expires on the 6th of March and we apply for 2021 resident visa, so say they apply right at the beginning of 1st or 2nd or 3rd March, do we get an interim visa? And should they wait for the interim visa? What's the advice? Do you just want to talk people through?
Yes, they should get the interim visa because the whole concept is that if the system picks it up, so bear in mind, interim visa is not like a person doesn't go in and they don't do it. The system generates it, and if the system reads that an application, that a 2021 RV applications come in for you, And it records as your other visa being expired or soon to expire, it will generate an interim visa unless there are reasons why it shouldn't, which is like a rare.
Kevin, and I'll just add to that as well that, Kevin, it also depends on when you apply, because the RV applications open on the 1st of March. So say hypothetically you were going to be applying on the 5th of March, 4th of March, and you get your RV in, that may not be enough time for the system to automatically generate, to trigger an interim visa, which is where manual intervention may be required. And this happens in the normal circumstances as well. When someone's, they've actually applied for the new visa pretty much close to the expiry date, then you may not automatically just get an interim visa. Sometimes you have to call the ICC to actually get it emailed to us. So it just also depends on when you get that RV application in. But you should, as long as you get it in prior, you should get an interim visa, and if that's the right path for you. I did my Zinnia. Do we have? We've got quite scanty information on medicals, but I think we've got enough to be able to say.
I should be able to.
I did my medicals in January 2018. I've applied for my work visa with same role this month, but with start date immigration takes place because 36 months last right. I don't understand the question. I think we'll just talk about medicals generally, just so people can understand.
There's a question here from Harneet, if I could take that. She said, I submitted my full medicals for temporary visa 6 months ago, and during the application assessment, INZ asked for additional information, specialist assessment, and subsequently the visa was approved after submission of additional information. May I know if I need to get new medicals, limited medical certificate done for residency application? So this would be a scenario where immigration makes further, like if somebody's either ASH with conditions, ASH is acceptable standard of health. Either they're ASH with conditions or they're simply just ASH, but just based on further information. For such scenarios, you do not have to provide additional information like specialist reports upfront. Wait for INZ to ask. Chances are they will ask, but wait for that information to come through because they may not ask. So because the medical policy under 2021 RV is different to temporary visas, it's different to normal residencies. So I would only ask people to go get specialist info if asked, but doesn't need to be provided upfront.
There's another question. Thank you, Zinnia. There's another question and there's actually a few questions here that talk about going outside of New Zealand once they've got the RV 2021 application lodged. Two things to remember. One, once you've got an RV 2021 application in the immigration system and you leave the country, that application will go on hold. Second, on an interim visa, you can't actually leave because it's got single entry. So you can't actually come and go. So as soon as you leave the country, one, you've got no valid visa if you are on an interim visa. So I don't know how you're going to return. And the RV is on hold. If you have a situation where you do need to go for emergency, but you do have a way to come back, then that may be okay to put your RV on hold for a brief time, but to know that you're going to come back, because otherwise you'll get into a real tricky situation. Is there anything to add in there? We didn't touch on the travel bit.
No, that's fine. I think people would be aware, everyone would be aware that, there was the border news that came out earlier this week about, in April, the border would start opening to foreign national in phased approach. And then there was the news about the new variant, which is now in Australia. So you never know where these things go, where the border opens, doesn't open. Who knows?
Yeah. So I would always say err at the side of caution. It's the smarter way to do. I mean, we do understand people have emergencies, but then your resident visa will be put on hold. How long it's going to be put on hold, how long they just leave it if someone just leaves the country, we don't have that information from immigration yet. I think they're still working through a whole lot of stuff as we go. Right now, they're just geared up for the 1st of December applications that are going to open, and then there'll be a lot of information that'll be feeding through for the 1st of March people. Zinnia, do we just want to talk about dependents? I know we're very close to the end of our session. Do we need to pay extra fees to add dependents for 2021 visa?
No. That was a quick answer.
Yeah. Can partners and children be included in the RV 2021 application?
Yes.
I applied my EOI under SMC last year in October and application was EOI pooled but not accepted. So my question is, when I apply for my RV 2021, December or in March?
March.
If you did not have any kids that were over 17, as you haven't mentioned, then you go in March. And it is quite important that people do understand that if you are not eligible for the first phase, that you do go into the second phase, because otherwise it will lead to a decline. God, Zibi you've put your question at least 8 times. We have answered it. It's a good effort to make sure we don't miss it. But hopefully you got the answer that you were after. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to ping me or Zinnia.
There's some good questions here. I've got a question here. Hi, ladies. My visa expired 19 November. I was issued interim visa, applied for new visa 4th October. Couldn't do medical until they opened it because I stay in Auckland. Now, new medical was submitted 3 weeks ago and still no case officer, so no new visa. I was supposed to submit the one-off visa, residence visa on 1st December. Now I can't even do that because I'm on interim visa. So depending on when I get my new work to residence visa, will that determine my position in the queue? So he can't, he's on an interim right now. He was eligible to submit on 1st, but he can't. And he's saying that do I need to wait to get my work to residence visa in hand before I can submit? Well, yes, because you need to be on a temporary visa to submit.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
It's an interesting one, right? It's just because he's stuck. Like they haven't given him an immigration officer, and so that's why he's sitting on an interim visa.
And that kind of leads into the next question, which Melinda's asking, that if you fall into the phase, do you actually have to apply as soon as it opens, or can you apply later as well? I think it is really important to know for people that are in phase one that you can apply anytime from 1st of December to 28th of Feb. So, Steve, in your situation, it may be worth finding out if you're going to get an officer, what's happening. Sometimes even negotiating with an officer that, I need to put an RV application in might be worth it. But I'd be very keen to actually have a chat with you and see. Yeah, to actually try and get in.
Yeah, try and submit.
What documents are needed for settled criteria? Well, immigration has published a checklist on the website, and there's details in there. Let's see, my favorite is 24.
Settled doesn't require any documents because immigration picks up your travel history from AMS records.
Yes, there's some really specific questions coming here. Kishan is asking that my pay rate suddenly increased from 24 to 27. How do I prepare myself? We can't obviously give that. If you want answers from us, you'll have to engage with us. That is quite a specific question. We do have a lot of people in this scenario, and there's it just depends on what your situation is. We need to peel off a few layers. Good to see you, Dollar. Thank you for your comment.
Our daughter turns 18 on Friday and finishes year 13 in December. We intend on applying in phase one. Would we still need to apply for a different dependent visa after Jan? Well, if a visa is valid, then you wouldn't need to. If a visa is expired, then you would get an interim visa on assuming that you've submitted phase one RV already. So if that answers your question, then that's great. If not, you're welcome to put up a follow-up.
I think one of the key questions that we do here is that if my SMC application, and it's somewhere here as I've seen it a couple of times, that if your SMC or your skilled application is under processing, and say you got a PPI or concern, and now we're into the, will immigration still adjust the entire fees of your SMC application, or will they take part of it? We've received clarification from immigration that even if they've worked on an SMC application and done all of this work, all of that fees will move towards your RV 2021. So it's not that they will deduct a part of it. So I think that should be a relief to a lot of you. Zinnia, sorry, there's just lots. It takes me a while, so you're more than welcome to read the next and pick it up.
Okay, I'm just more than okay. All right. Do both partners have to provide medical certificate one-off visa? The requirements to provide limited certificate. So if your old ones are expired, or if your health has deteriorated, applies to both. It's not just the main applicant. So you only have to provide limited medicals if you are meeting one of those conditions.
I'll pick this other one up. It says, is there going to be a change to SMC process now that RV is launched, processing all pending applications? That's a really good question, because obviously SMC has been closed since March last year. What we're hearing is that probably by around the August time next year, there'll be new criteria introduced within the SMC category. And that's when SMC will probably begin to open. Whether that is going to be August, or whether their immigration or the government is going to try and finish all the backlog through RV and then start off, we don't know. But the date that has been announced so far is around that August time next year. And it will probably, I won't be surprised if it looks very different. Open work visa expiring on the 8th of March. Is it okay to go on interim visa or apply for essential skills from 1st of Feb? Look, very clear answer. We did say it at the beginning of the session. I would strongly suggest that you listen to the session again. If you are not looking at changing your position, not changing your employer, happy where you are for the next 12 months and basically freezing your conditions, then interim visa works perfectly for you. And if you're confident that your RV 2021 will be approved. If you are looking at a change, if you're looking at moving roles, doing any of that, then an interim visa won't work for you because it just locks you in. On an interim visa, you can't go on to another, can't change job, can't do a variation, can't go on to another visa. So just think about that and accordingly plan. Maddie, thank you. It's interesting. She says, thank you, ladies, for answering my question for free. One advisor wanted to charge me $300 to answer that question. Much appreciated. You're most welcome, Maddie. If we need to submit limited medical, do we also need to submit X-ray if it was done in the last application more than 36 months ago?
If it's more than 36 months ago, do we need limited? Yes.
Limited does have X-ray. Limited does need X-ray as far as I understand. And if it's more than 36 months ago, then you'll most likely need it. Okay, I'm aware of the time. There's no way we can get through the questions at all.
I want to take this up.
Okay. Zinnia, you're on mute.
Am I still
you're good. You're good.
I just had a call coming. I have a refusal of Australia student visa, but then my agent didn't disclose about it when I applied my New Zealand student visa from my home country. After that, I never disclose about that with any of my applications that I made within the last 5 years. What should I do now? I'm eligible for all three. It's a common one that we get.
I will tell you what I've told people in my last 15 years. I would strongly suggest that if you haven't declared and if you haven't applied for residence previously, this is your first residence application, I would strongly suggest that you do declare and you give really good reasons as to why you didn't declare. There could be lots of reasons. You just didn't know. You never maybe didn't use an advisor. Because the immigration systems are a lot smarter now than they were many, many years ago. The countries can talk a lot better with each other. So I think you do need to balance pros and cons, because if immigration finds out that you did have a decline and you did not declare, that can have a lot worse ramifications rather than if you had a real credible explanation why you didn't declare. If you were just being naughty and you did not declare because you knew you didn't want to declare, then you probably need to speak to an advisor to seek specific advice to see what is the right way for you. But yeah, this is what drags a lot of applications down. Okay, I'm aware it's 6:37 p.m. and we've been talking for 37 minutes straight. Zinnia, unless there are any more pressing questions that you can see that we haven't covered, because we've covered a whole lot of topics.
I don't know. There's so many. I don't know which one to pick. So
yeah, I think we've covered on birth certificates. We've talked about interim visas. We've talked about what the niggly things where things can go wrong. We've talked about quite a few things, I think. Traffic fines, no convictions. Talitha, last question. The form, read the form quite carefully. The form clearly asks for charges and convictions, and traffic fines and tickets are not part of it. If you haven't really had a conviction or an offense or not under charge at the moment, then it doesn't really qualify. Okay, that's us, guys. Thank you for joining us. We had a good about 140 people listening at one point. Thank you for your comments. We will actually see you next year now, but we are on our Facebook page. So if you do have questions, please keep posting and our teams will pick it up. Obviously not now, because we'll pick it up next day because we all need to go and have some dinner and cook. So thank you for listening. Have a great Christmas. Have a great New Year's. God, it actually feels, this is the first time I've said it this year. Have a great Christmas. But yeah, take care. Any closing comments from you, Zinnia?
No, I think it's just it's going to be an interesting summer, for especially those of us in Auckland. But yeah.
And good luck to the 1st of December people that are going to be applying this year.
The form opens at 6 a.m. for those. I thought we didn't mention that. It's opens at 6 a.m. day after tomorrow. Today's Monday, right? Yeah, day after tomorrow, 6 a.m. Because a lot of our teams are getting ready to go at 6.
But you don't have to apply at 6 a.m. on the 1st of December. It just goes on because it's not going to be first come, first serve. Yes. But yeah, that's us. Have a good evening all.
Thank you. Bye.